Gina Heumann, welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Yeah, I'm super excited to have the chance to talk. You're going to be a bit of a unique guest on this podcast. I've interviewed so many really interesting people that bring different perspectives, and yours is an important one that we need to discuss, though it is a bit unique. So your story, which we're going to explore together today, directly impacts, of course, your family, but it also has implications for the workplace. And really what we're going to be discussing today is employee mental health and well-being in the workplace, not just for employees and what managers and leaders can do for their employees' mental health and well-being, but also considering their families, right? And that's something that you bring to the table today with your family's story, and how organizations, how leaders can be more accommodating to families that are dealing with challenges around mental health issues and some of those other types of well-being types of topics. As we get started today, I just wanted to share Gina's bio with the listeners. Gina Heumann is a true Renaissance woman, wife, mother, architect, designer, instructor, author, speaker, and adoption advocate. She and her husband, Aaron, adopted Landry in 2001 from Guatemala, and then went back for Maddox 3 years later, who was later diagnosed with reactive attachment disorder. RAD is a terrifying mental illness that leads to extreme anger, anxiety, and violence. Gina's love of learning and dedication as a mother inspired her research of different treatments and therapies that eventually led to their inspirational success story. Gina is an accomplished speaker who covers the topics and subjects of adoption, reactive attachment disorder, children's mental health, PTSD, infertility, and parenting. Again, what a great expertise you have and that you bring to the table today. I know your general focus isn't in the workplace, but there's so much of what you know and what you can share that I think will cross over to organizational leaders and perhaps give us a little bit more insight and help us to have more compassion and empathy for employees that are dealing with some of the types of struggles that your families had to deal with. Before we really launch into the discussion, anything else you want to provide by way of introduction, personal background?
My expertise that you talk about came without my planning. So this was just kind of a decade of putting out fires and trying to figure out what was going on in our family so that we could react. And now that we're through it to the other side, I've really tried to focus on giving back and helping others so that they don't have to go through as long a process as we do.
Well, yeah, that's great. And sometimes the best expertise is the expertise of living experts, right? The lived
Right.
experience of people who've had to go through the school of hard knocks and self-educate in a lot of ways as you're just trying to deal with things. And I know that's in large part what you bring to the table, but that's really good because again, that helps us. Most of the people who listen to this podcast are organizational leaders, they're managers, they're people trying to know what to do right by their employees, how to be more successful, more effective. And one of the things we don't talk a lot about is emotional, psychological well-being. And when we do talk about it, it's usually focused on the particular mental health challenges, perhaps, of the employee, not always considering that, family life will bleed over into work life. And if we have family members that are also struggling, that's something that we need to find ways to accommodate. So we can talk some about what that could look like towards the end of the episode today. As we get started, could you just give us kind of the quick and dirty, 5-minute or less kind of version of your story in terms of the adoptions and how the struggle started to unfold?
Oh, sure. My husband and I went through about 4 years of infertility treatments and trying to get pregnant, and then determined that we were meant to adopt. So we started looking into different adoption agencies. We ended up settling on Guatemala, and we adopted our first son from there. He was easy. He was My friends used to call him the Stepford child because he was really well behaved. He was really mellow. He was the easiest kid in the world. We, of course, thought it was our stellar parenting. So we went back to Guatemala a few years later and got another boy from Guatemala. Their experiences could not have been more different. My first son's birth mother was older. She had other children. She had a good job where she was a housekeeper for a family that had a restaurant. So she had good nutrition, and she got paid decently. My other son's birth mother was young. She was from a very, very poor area of Guatemala that's known for malnutrition. And I don't think he got the same treatment in the womb. And then afterwards, my first son went to a foster family until we were able to pick him up, who he was their first foster baby. So they doted on him. They had 4 children that played with him and held him, and he was loved. And in fact, we're still in touch with them. My second son went to a foster mom who we strongly believe neglected him. And not knowing at the time what to look for, we didn't know the signs of neglect, and we just had a bad feeling about her. So over the years, then things just became challenging, and they started out challenging. Like he had to be in the planets had to be aligned in order for him to go to sleep at night. He didn't sleep well at night. He didn't nap. He had 4-hour tantrums as a small child, and there was no consoling him. Like usually with a regular kid, you just, give them a new toy or a snack, and they turn things around. They forget all about what they were upset about. Mine never forgot. So he was very challenging. And then as he got older, he got violent and would lash out at us. And what he was eventually diagnosed, and this took us 10 years, he was eventually diagnosed with reactive attachment disorder, which is a really scary mental illness caused by abuse and neglect in the first 3 years of life. It actually rewires the brain so that he is unable to access the higher level thinking skills that help you stop flipping out. And then as he got older and older, it became scary to live here. And one of the traits of reactive attachment disorder is that it's the parents or the person closest to them that gets treated the worst. So I really struggled. I was home with him at the time, and he was punching holes in the walls and not wanting to go to school, and it was very challenging. So after like almost a decade, I'd say, of really frightening behaviors and trying to do everything we could. I mean, we tried every kind of therapy you can imagine. We eventually found the right therapist. We got the right treatment. It was a 2-week family intensive. My husband had just started his new job at this time and had to take 2 weeks off, or really just, it was 4 hours a day. So it was, he had to take half days in his first couple months of working there, and his boss was really great about it. So we did this family therapy, and that was kind of the catalyst to my son improving and starting to get better. We also found another school, and between all of that, it took about a year after that point before we started to notice that he's really not the same kid he was, a few years ago. So and now we're in a great place. My son is 16. He's a junior in high school. He's, got friends. He's in the band. It's a whole different thing. He's got a girlfriend. So life is good.
Well, good. I'm so glad to hear, the happy ending. And I know it's not an ending; it's ongoing. But
Right.
It's wonderful that things have been able to improve. But it is just so difficult to figure out that kind of care. I can't directly relate to what you've experienced, as I haven't as a parent. had those types of challenges. I did grow up in a home that I have one sibling who continues to have a lot of mental health challenges. And so I do at least somewhat understand, how it can be really challenging. My sister who was born about 4 months early, had all sorts of physical and mental development challenges, being born that early, and then lots of layered on top of that, lots of mental health issues. And she takes her whole cocktail of drugs, antipsychotics, and everything to try to help her to be able to cope with life. And man, it's work. And I just remember as a sibling how hard that was, but I know my parents, and even today, how hard that is for my parents, and it's just such a challenge, right? And
Yeah.
so I think it's important for us to, at least to the extent possible, to try to have some compassion and understanding for people who are dealing with these types of struggles. And in our pre-interview, we were discussing a little bit about, what we would chat about today. And you had expressed, some of the challenges you've had with work during this time while you were trying to figure things out and get behaviors under control and get therapy and all these sorts of things. So can you tell us a little bit about what you experienced? Anything that you experienced that was good? You already shared the experience of your husband where they were accommodating, but also some of the things that weren't so helpful and that negatively impacted you and your family.
Yeah. I mean, as we got further and further into this, it became pretty clear that we needed another salary in order to afford all of this therapy. Most of it wasn't covered by the insurance that my husband got at work. Most mental health therapies are not covered, at least not in full, and it gets really expensive, especially when you get to the specialists. It's hundreds of dollars an hour, and we're having to be there many hours a week. So that part was very challenging. So when I did go back to work, I found a full-time job. I was getting calls from the school all the time. I was getting calls from the nanny. It was bad. So I would have to drop everything and get home on occasion, or my husband would have to drop everything and get home. But he's the real breadwinner in our house. So he was the one that would stay at work most of the time, and I would have to go. And, after a few months of this, even though I had the kind of work I could take home with me, most of my employers didn't like the fact that I had to drop everything and go get my kid, but I didn't know what else to do. We didn't have family in town. We didn't have, a lot of people that would help us out through this. And so it was really just me and my husband trying to wade through this mess and raise our son the best we could and still afford all of the therapies that he needed.
Yeah. And so, you highlight the challenge, and I understand from the perspective of an organization, of a manager, they're thinking, hey, you're my employee. We are paying you. You're supposed to be doing the work, and you're constantly being distracted. You're constantly having to go do these other things. I get it. I understand that's a challenge, and I can understand why they wouldn't want to deal with that. But that said, I think we need to think about, what if we were in that situation? How would we want to be approached? How would we want to be managed? What kinds of accommodations would we appreciate? What would be reasonable to try to help this valued employee to find balance in their life and to be able to deal with their family matters, but also do the work? And you highlighted one issue that probably could have been a reasonable accommodation for that job, is if you had work that could be done from home, it could be done in alternate hours,
Right.
then that's an accommodation that you can just make. And if nothing else, COVID has forced us to acknowledge, that people can work from home. Like people can work different hours. We can accommodate. We can use technology. Not every job can allow for that. You
Right.
have some jobs where you have to be there during certain hours. you're customer facing, you have to be there in person. But there are other jobs or parts of jobs where, yeah, you can do it anytime, anywhere. It doesn't really matter as long as you're getting the work done and being productive. And so I think one of the most important things that leaders can consider as they're trying to find ways to be understanding and accommodating to their employees, whether it's the employees' own challenges they're dealing with, their own mental health issues, their own well-being, or if it's the well-being of a family member, in the family dynamics and the challenges that they're facing. Think about flexible schedules. What kind of flexibility can you provide in the schedule? What kind of flexibility can you provide to help members of your team respond to family matters that might be a little bit disruptive, but are necessary for the overall well-being of your employee?
Hmm.
Can virtual work be on the table? What kind of boundaries are in place so that you're not, when your employee goes home, they're not getting calls and emails all weekend or in the evenings, so when they're home, they can be home with their family. These are all the types of things that we need to really consider. And I think a lot of times there are far more reasonable accommodations that can be made pretty easily, pretty inexpensively by employers for their employees, if we're just compassionate and thoughtful and try to make an effort to provide that kind of support. And I suspect that would have made a world of difference for you and for your family, for your son, while you're going through that difficult time, if you could have had that level of support from your employer.
Oh yeah, I have one really great manager who, after maybe the second or third time I got a call from the school, she brought me into her office and she said, "Tell me what's going on with your family. I'm really worried about you." And so I kind of started telling her a little bit about what was going on, and she was very accommodating. My job was, at the time, I was developing online training programs. So most of my work was on the computer. I had a laptop. I could take it home with me. She was fine with it. Unfortunately, after about 10, 11 months, she left that job, and I got a new manager who wasn't nearly as accommodating. So he was like, "If you're not here, out of sight, out of mind, you're not working." So even though I could check in by email many times a day, they could get a hold of me as much as they needed to. I think this COVID thing has been really good for people like me who, might need some time at home. I think it's been helpful because businesses are starting to see that there is technology out there. There is ways that people can get work done at home, and some people are really productive at home.
Yeah, and in fact, there's tons of research on this, that not everybody, but most people actually are more productive at home. And so,
Yep.
it does depend on the job, and there are some jobs where you need to be in person, or some aspects of a job where you just need to be physically there. But what COVID has forced us to acknowledge is that there is far less of that than I think people previously thought. And your one manager who said, "Yeah, out of sight, out of mind, that's not a situation I want to deal with," frankly, that's lazy management, and it's not good leadership, because that's kind of an old school mentality of, I need to have tight control over my people, I need to be there, I need to see them, I need to monitor them all the time. That's not trust. That's not employee empowerment. That's not any of the things that will lead to the best performance of an employee. And so, not that everything needs to be virtual now. And once COVID's over, there'll be a lot of people that return back to a physical workspace. But this has demonstrated that we can be more accommodating. We can provide more opportunity for people to deal with these types of issues. I have 6 children at home doing online schooling. And both, we're fortunate. Both my wife and I are professors. We have the ability to largely do our work virtually. I go into campus every now and then, but mostly I'm working from home, and I can help my kids. And thank goodness for that accommodation, because I literally don't know what we would do if my employer, if the university required me to be sitting in my office, 8 to 5 every day. I get my work done. I'm very productive. but that's just not in the cards. It could not work in our situation right now.
Right.
And lots of other families are in similar situations. So let's just figure it out as organizations, as leaders. Let's let go of the old school mentality of management by control, um, and allow people to be their whole selves, which means there's messiness involved, which means as an employee, I might have my own mental health challenges or physical health challenges or general well-being issues that I'm dealing with, but it goes into my family too. If I had a challenging situation with a child or with a spouse, I'm going through a divorce or whatever, like there's all these situations that life just throws at you that might impact your performance. But again, research shows that when accommodations are made and when employers and leaders can show some compassion and support, that a lot of times those valued employees, they can weather the storm. They can then come out even more loyal, more committed, more productive for the organization if they're shown that kind of support.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the really good manager I had also sat me down and pointed out that we had one of those employee assistance programs where, as soon as she heard what was going on with my son, she says, well, we have this employee assistance program. You need to use it. It's free. And, a lot of companies, I think we had it, but they didn't really point it out, and they didn't, it was very hard to figure out how to use it. So I think to make that more accessible to people as well would be helpful.
Yes, that's a very good point, because those types of benefits are not what we're always used to utilizing, right? And employers, not always, but often, they'll have a whole big laundry list, cafeteria list of different types of benefits they provide to their employees. A lot of them, aren't necessarily the ones that we're ever going to really be aware of unless someone makes us aware of them. So that's
Right.
one thing that we absolutely, as leaders in organizations, we can and should be doing, is making ourselves aware of what is there for our employees. We don't
Mm-hmm.
have to do it all ourselves as a leader. I can't possibly, if I have a big team, I can't possibly personally provide all of the support that that person needs. But that's why
Right.
the organization provides these benefits, and they should be utilized. So let's make sure that, like your boss did, pull you in, have a discussion. There has to be some self-disclosure there. They can't know what you don't tell them, but
Right.
if you build trust in the workplace, then your employees will be more comfortable sharing, and then you'll be able to know, and then you can say, hey, we have this resource, maybe you should go talk to this person. We can help you. We want you to continue to be successful, and we want you to be a productive member of our team. Let us help you. That's the attitude we should have with our employees. And I think a lot of times it doesn't happen, not because leaders don't have good intentions, but because you're just busy, and you're putting out fires, and you're trying to figure out all the things you're running around trying to take care of everything. And if you don't take the time to notice that an employee is really struggling, if you don't take the time to have that discussion with them, if you don't take the time to try to develop those relationships and try to have that trust, then it's going to be next to impossible to be supportive in that kind of a way.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah. Well, it has really been a pleasure talking with you, Gina. I really appreciate you being vulnerable and sharing your story with us, and the journey. It's something that every family has to deal with in one way or another. There's really no such thing as the perfect, ideal, kind of a situation. Like, everyone has their challenges, and so it's a matter of us learning from each other and trying to figure out how we can all lift and support each other. And your story helps to share and shed light on that kind of a situation. And hopefully for those listening, leaders can recognize and understand their role and how they can contribute more to the well-being of their people.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Well, as we wrap up today, I did want to give you the final word and give you a chance to share with listeners, what they can do to reach out and get connected with you. And perhaps they want to talk with you more specifically about some of the specifics around the parenting issues or the mental health issues or the therapy and, those sorts of things, the adoption, um, uh, let us know how we can get connected.
Yes, I did write a book about our story. It's called Love Never Quits. It won a gold medal at the Parents' Choice Awards, so I was pretty excited about that. And then I also did a TED Talk, which is on YouTube right now, Gina Heumann, childhood trauma affects us all. And I do have a website at loveneverquitsbook.com, so they can find out all about me. I'm trying to do a class right now for parents who have kids with childhood trauma and really just get the word out. I've testified in front of Congress now to try to change some of our mental health laws to make it easier and more accessible for parents like me to get treatment. Because, I mean, my husband and I are both highly educated, had really good jobs, and a decent income, and still we were going broke doing this for our kids. If my husband had a more blue-collar job, I'm not sure we ever would have gotten through this. And we need more support for more people out there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you again so much. It's been a real pleasure talking. I hope my listeners will reach out, get connected, check out your book, check out the website. And I hope everyone listening, will really consider, what are some of the types of unique circumstances that your people are dealing with, and how can you, be a safe place for them to self-disclose, where they know that they can get support, where they can get help, and then you can provide the types of reasonable accommodations, that can make a huge difference in their lives and the lives of their families. I hope everyone continues to stay healthy and safe. I hope everyone can find meaning and purpose at work each and every day, and have a great week. Thank you.
Thank you.